biologic use for rheumatological conditions has been increasing steadily over the last few years. And we're very used to combining this with traditional therapies such as methotrexate. But it's becoming more and more apparent that many people are starting by or being on biologic therapy as a monotherapeutic agent. And it's a real pleasure to introduce Dr. DrPappas from Columbia University here in the US to talk about his abstract in relation to this. Dimitris, could you tell us a little bit about your paper, please?
Sure. So I would like to start by saying that the data were generated in the Corona registry. Corona stands for Consortium of Rheumatology Researchers of North America. It's a patient registry following over 35,000 patients with rheumatoid arthritis. It was established in 2001, and we now have expanded internationally, Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Asia. So we mined the data from the US registry. We identified 10,000 patients who initiated the biologic, approximately 10,000 patients. And the reason we did that because we had a scientific curiosity and we wanted to figure out how frequent is monotherapy. We were surprised to find out that approximately 1 in 4 patients overall takes a biologic as a monotherapy without concurrent traditional DMARDs. Approximately 1 in 5 patients naive to biologics start their first biologic as monotherapy. And we also tried to identify who are those patients, look into their specific characteristics and try to find out some associations, and I could tell you more about that if you would like.
Sure, so that's very important. What are the characteristics of those patients? Why would somebody be potentially for example, started on a biologic as a monotherapy?
Yeah, so we looked in this question in 2 ways. We identified approximately 10,000 patients, as I said, who started any biologic or more than one biologic during their stay in our registry. Our registry has been around for more than 10 years now. And in a descriptive way, we try to identify some characteristics. So we found there that the more experienced the patient was on a biologic, the more likely it was to start the next biologic as monotherapy. So it was 1 in 5 patients starting monotherapy, either were biologic naive. It was more common, almost up to 1 to 4 patients starting the biologic as monotherapy. So the more experienced, the more likely the patient was to start the biologic as monotherapy. And also after 2006, we used 2006 as an arbitrary cutoff, I would say, because more biologics became available for therapy, were approved. So it seems that if the biologics were prescribed after 2006, when more biologics were available in the market and more biologics had been approved as monotherapy, it was also more likely to start as a monotherapy. We looked into the reasons the concurrent traditional DMARD was stopped. And one of the most common reasons was prior toxicity to the DMARD. And then we isolated approximately 3,000 patients who were biologic naive at the time they started the first biologic. And we ran regression models to identify what are the factors associated or predicting, quote unquote, the initiation of a biologic as monotherapy. And history of previous adverse events such as neutropenia, any kind of hepatic events.
Nausea, alopecia, all
we didn't
these
look
things.
that specific. I remember that there was neutropenia, history of hepatic events, history of malignancy. So if you had any history of those, then it was much more likely that as a biologic naive, you would more likely start the biologic as monotherapy. So you would avoid the concurrent toxicities of traditional DMARDs.
Which makes sense. So it's important that we know this information, because we need to have medications that people like to take, that work, that are not toxic, and that they will take in the long term.
I agree. So you had some questions about nausea, for example, and alopecia, right? We didn't look into all these details, but what we found was that there was an independent effect of the physician. So beyond the history of prior malignancy, prior hepatic toxicity, right? After we adjusted for all that, there was an independent effect for the physician. So some physicians tended to prescribe biologic as monotherapy more frequently compared to others for specific patients. And there was also an independent patient effect. There were some patients who, for some reason, were more likely to receive a biologic as monotherapy. So we will have to look more into why is that, but the odds ratios, were very high. So it seems that there's an independent effect. Maybe it has to do with prescription patterns, habits, physician habits, other beliefs.
Okay, so the take-home message from your paper?
The take-home message is that monotherapy is very common out there. We don't have data to show whether it's as effective or efficacious as biologic agents in combination, but these patients in our registry stay on monotherapy, so for the moment I will assume that it's a great alternative option, which may decrease the possibilities or the frequencies of added toxicity when they are prescribed with traditional DMARDs.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.